because it's still snowing, so
All right.
All right.
Well, I think Nicole is sending a message that we should be serious here.
Yes, that's right. So we're still waiting for Mariah, but I think we can go ahead and get started. So just let me just pull up our agenda. No. All right, so the first item on the agenda is the approval of the roll call, but actually before that, I will do the minutes for this meeting because I'm next in alphabetical order.
Thank you.
So I'll take care of that. And then our roll call, Dick,
Here.
Cliff
Here.
is here. Mariah is not yet here. Jeff.
Yes.
And Sid is here as well, as an additional member of our group. All right, so moving on to the minutes. We don't yet have the minutes from the 17th, which is fine. We do have the minutes from the 9th of February. Any questions or edits to that?
I will move them.
All right, I'll second. And let's go ahead and vote. Dick?
Yes.
Cliff? Yes. All right, I see a signal of yes. Jeff?
Yes, please.
And I also vote yes. All right. Thank you. And so then the next topic is BEEP. So Jeff, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Right. Sorry, I forgot I was first. Let me just look. Okay. So let me grab the doc. So I sent out the doc to everyone. There wasn't a lot of change from the last time we reviewed it. Let me pull it open here. We'll grab that. Grab that. Share desktop.
And also Mariah texted me to say she's on her way. She's running a little bit late.
Awesome. Okay, so the catch up from last time. I was able to meet with Margaret, who was delightful. We took a little while of playing phone tag, and then we finally connected last Thursday. I was able to get some of the questions about like the wait list answered. And we started to get deep into the piece of the analysis about whether or not, if you all remember, we were talking about this chart and how we had all this information about the general fund budget, and it was all broken out into people and programs and all that kind of stuff. And we started talking about whether or not we could see that for the entire BEEP, not just the general fund piece, which she did confirm was the piece, if you like to think of it, for what I'll refer to as the inclusionary piece of it, right? So this includes special ed plus the students that have to be in there per the ratios per the state law. She said she had that information. It would be much easier to send it to me than it would be for us to kind of try to go through it on the phone. But I haven't gotten it from her yet. So that part, once I get it, I'm happy to come back around. Now I realize this is our last meeting, right, Siddharth, of our subcommittee.
No, it is not our.
Oh, what?
Sorry, we have meetings booked until I think the 9th or the 11th, something like that, just for the next few weeks. Our report is going to be sent to the select board on the 13th of March, and so we're meeting until that. So it's like 2 or 3 more sessions. They should be on your calendar.
Okay.
Wishful thinking, Jeff.
Give me a second. I must have looked at the old schedule.
And yes, not everything was updated in the last schedule. It is updated, and I reposted it for today.
Got
so
it.
we can go through that. But the meetings were sent out on everyone's calendar to reserve.
Okay. Okay, my bad on that one then. So when I get that information, we can go through BEEP for a fourth time. So what I've updated for today is I added, and I tried to blurb this a little bit to everybody just so that I didn't want you all digging through this document.
thank you.
A lot is the same. I added a little bit more background information, which we talked about before. I also weaved in some of the info I got from Margaret that talks a little bit about the waiting list. It's quite intriguing, actually. The long to short is that, if I understand it correctly, there's a waiting list for all of the BEEP school classrooms. You get to prioritize the location that you would like. So you can say, I'd like to go to FRR, and if not there, then Driscoll, and if not there, Beacon Street. And then there's a lottery on March 1st, which is about to happen. So that was actually useful because Margaret had all the numbers and essentially knew how many people were going to be on the wait list based on how many slots they had and how many applicants they had. So we talked a little bit through that. If you are chosen in your first, then you get your first choice. And if you're second and your first choice is already gone, which presumably it wouldn't be at that point, but you get the idea, then you'd get your second choice and on down the road. So that piece I put in, that was one of the pieces we had talked about, whether or not there was a waiting list or that kind of thing. The only piece of other interest to pull out of that is that there are certainly locations that are quote unquote more popular than others. More popular just probably meaning more people live closer to those locations. I don't actually know, but Margaret did say that when they looked at all the numbers, there were certainly locations, of which FRR and Driscoll were 1 and 2, that ended up being the one that the most people would put 1 or 2 down as their choice. So I added that piece. This piece is mostly the same. Enrollment data is the same. The comparable comps are the same. So then this was the one other piece that I updated. So what I did is, and again, making the same assumptions that I made last time, that the info that we got out of the various memos, budget books, and the BEEP handbook would essentially allow me to craft this cost per student. And what I have added since last time is these extra columns out here for school year 26, 27, and 20. That's a typo there. This should say 27, 28. So we took the 8% increase that was voted on by the school committee, and I applied that through. So you see the 18,079 for tuition next year, and then it'll be 19,526 the year after that. And then I applied just a 5% cost riser. I don't know what number to put in there. I wanted to put something that seemed reasonable. So I ended up with 5%. I think Sadaf, I might have also asked you if you had any thoughts on that. So again, we don't know what that number necessarily is going to be, but I plugged it in, and that allows us to kind of see over time, are we going in lockstep with the cost rises versus the tuition rises? And it actually, at 5% cost increase and 8% tuition increase, it catches up, and then we actually get into the green after or during 27, 28, assuming that 5%. So I added a bunch of language in here that talks about what I just told you guys, and I think that is it. That's the same. The extended day is the same. Yeah. So that's it. So those are the changes from last time. And as soon as I get the info from Margaret, I will happily add that in, and we can chat about that. And any questions about this?
So a couple of things, a couple of observations. So thank you for doing this. I think one point around the wait list is it would probably be good to tie that to just explicitly say that, like, we see that as an indication that there is additional demand, right? As a justification for this recommendation, that we should take a look at the financials and consider looking at the tuition. So I think that might be worth considering adding.
Sure, I can make that explicit.
The second thing that I think might be useful is in the budget book. they have a bunch of financials. I'm sure this is what Margaret was pulling from. You know, 'cause this would have been published, was just published a
They
few days ago.
do, but they still have the same basic info
Okay, so it
that they
is.
had last year. There's a little bit of updates, and I didn't have a chance to update for this year, but I can update that now, while while Margaret and I figure out the data. But it was very similar. I looked at it. Enrollment was very similar. We already knew the tuition update. There wasn't any additional info in the budget book on the full budget across all of the types. It still just had the general fund. It didn't have the revolver broken out and the other pieces.
Okay. All right, fair enough. And then the last thing I was going to say was I think it might be useful to pull up, you have a recommendation related to extended day.
Yes.
It's sort of later on in the document, but not reiterated at the top.
Oh, sure.
It might be good to sort of consolidate that. Otherwise, that recommendation is
Gets
actually.
buried. Yep. Got it.
All right, Cliff.
Thanks. Just a question on the wait list. There are two words. There's applications, and then wait lists. What's the
Yeah.
difference?
So applications should be the total number of people who would like to apply to be in the program. And then the people who end up getting into the program, then I would assume become students, and the ones who don't ended up on the wait list. So maybe let's see, did I write something where I needed to be more explicit?
So the what
Oh
would
yeah.
what would be really interesting is to know how many people are applying.
Right. So like for this particular one, for 2-year-old applicants, there's 45 2-year-old applicants right now. 20 of them will end up on the wait list, and 25 of them will end up being enrolled.
Wow.
Similarly, oh, you know what? I didn't actually explicitly get the number of applicants for the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds, but I can ask Margaret for that.
That would be helpful, because that
sure.
gives the best indication of what the
Sure, the demand piece. Yep.
Yeah.
I can do that. Yep.
The other thing is your comment about the general fund information is available, but the other information is sort of like mixed in the revolving fund or
yes.
other place. Maybe it's worthwhile to add a recommendation talking of, for transparency purposes, for them to break out that information.
Oh, sure.
Separately.
Yeah, that's a great one, Cliff. And if the info, I'm not sure what format the info is going to come from Margaret, if she's going to send me some info from herself, or she's going to ask Dr. Givens. But if it's not some publicly available thing, which I'm assuming it's not, otherwise probably found it by now, I'll definitely add that one in there to make that public.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Numbers and public folder. Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Good.
Okay. Well, I'll hand it back to you, Steph. Thank you.
All right. So actually just some logistics, just given how few meetings we have left. I'm just trying to figure out, Jeff, when you expect to hear from Margaret, or when you think
Yeah, I'll hit her up again today. I didn't want to, since we had just spoken on Thursday, I didn't want to poke too hard, but I'll send her a note tonight or tomorrow and just see if she can get it to me this week.
Okay, because I think then we can review this. I mean, if you think there are going to be material changes to the numbers, and I don't know which data she said she was going to give to you, then we
Yeah,
won't.
I'm hoping it sort of confirms the assumptions that I made.
Yeah.
But of course it won't, and then I'll have to redo it. But that's okay. But we'll see what happens when we get it. So.
Okay, so we'll target next week for a vote.
Sure.
Then, ideally. Okay. Very good. Any other questions for Jeff?
No.
Before we move on? All right, thank you for doing that.
Sure.
All right, so the next
course.
topic is facilities. And Carol is here as well. And I made Carol co-host so she can speak also. So I believe the follow-up from last week, based on the recording that I watched, was that this document would be integrated into the facilities rentals document. And so there were a bunch of edits that were made, and then I think there were modifications that were made to the rentals document as well, to sort of accommodate and reference this also. Carol, do you want to come
Yeah,
on?
yeah, sure. So if you recall the discussion last week, we went round and round about how to, in the short period of time we had, to weave in the concept that Carol was had written the memo about, and how to weave in her particular memo. And the decision, as Sadaf mentioned, was that we would try to introduce it into the facilities rental document, and then attach it as an exhibit. And so what I did with Carol's assistance is to add a paragraph to the overview section of the revenue opportunities document, and then add into, as an appendix, the document that Carol had authored, and to modify that a little bit to make it clear, as I think it does. There are two documents you should be looking at. One is the updated facilities rental agreement. The other one is it's called Building V10. And it starts off with a preamble that says, look, we're talking a lot about the town and the public schools of Brookline in this appendix, but the considerations and recommendations really need to be applied to all town-owned assets and to all departments. And I'm not going to read through it, but that's the gist of the modification to the facilities usage document, pointing out that this is not directed solely at the schools, but the whole concept here is directed at, all town departments and all town assets. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, because it really, I think, just came out today, that's fine. I just encourage you to read it, and we can talk about it whenever people have digested those modifications, which are, fairly straightforward and simple.
Did people have an opportunity to read the documents?
Can I ask a question about the appendix?
Sure.
There's a lot of markups and highlights. What is the highlight in the second paragraph of that mean?
So that highlight is just, a lot of the stuff is just as I was going through this, but that wording replaces the wording that was taken out. Okay.
Yep.
That's the only reason that it's there. As to whether or not it should have been highlighted, no particular reason for it, other than probably when I was just working on it, I highlighted it for myself and never took it off when I forwarded it.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Mariah, I don't know if you had an opportunity to read the document. I know you were probably working today, and it came in during the day today, maybe late morning. But I'm interested in your perspective as our school committee representative. I mean, I'm interested in everyone's perspective.
I think that, this is an approach, and if this is what the subcommittee wants to recommend for the full report, that's okay. I mean, I think that I agree with the general assumption that there is money left on the table. And I also question whether if we are to truly account for the cost of the space, whether we will actually be able to, whether the space will be so expensive that it'll be cost prohibitive. But that also will save money if we're not like renting out the space at rates that aren't covering costs is a problem too. But that is my opinion, not me speaking on behalf of the school committee, of course.
Okay.
You're talking specifically about the rental aspect of the document as opposed to the appendix, which is actually something different.
I'm talking about both the rental and the idea of completely restructuring the relationship with, like, that part of it. You know, that's just something that the committee can recommend. And to me, that is, I will be impressed if Brookline is ever able to do anything so comprehensive of that. I'll put it like that.
Fair observation. Yeah, one of the things that will be a challenge, I think, for the building department is, and for everybody, is to be able to effectively calculate the incremental cost of staying open past certain hours, and versus what's going to be incurred anyway. I think that'd be a worthwhile but interesting exercise. And obviously, to Mariah's point, if that marginal cost of keeping the buildings open at all is more than what we can generate in revenue, relative to what we need to pay just to have the buildings, then that becomes a different question, right? And then it becomes a question of whether or not there's enough that's actually going to defer overall operating expenses. I don't know the answer to that either. That's a good question.
And the other thing, of course, which this is alluded to, although I don't think it's directly addressed in what you wrote, is that one of the biggest users is rec, that rec generates money. They charge for programs and do not pay to use the buildings. And so, would rec, if we're really truly looking to cover costs, like, it just completely changes not just the PSB model, but possibly the rec model as well.
But rec does reimburse the town for costs of operating programs, including general overhead. So you're right that there are considerations, but there is a practice of, frankly, charging as much as we can to rec, given that it is a revolving fund, and so there are legal limitations. And we've certainly raised the issue and asked the question about being able to allocate costs for, either depreciation or debt service, for the use of the buildings. I think that's the way rec, quote unquote, pays.
But rec does not pay for PSB rental spaces like the gyms that it uses or anything else. And you bring up a really interesting point, which is, if PSB were to pay rec, for example, or parks, I'll say, for use of the fields, like, the idea is that we're trading use of the fields for use of the buildings. And if PSB were to pay, it's coming out of the general fund. And if rec is paying, it's coming out of a revolving fund. So the sources of revenue are actually meaningfully different. Nonetheless, the agreement historically, dating back to the 90s, was that we weren't trying to allocate costs in either direction. And again, maybe that should be changed, but that's not something that's brought up, I don't think, anywhere in your memo.
Okay, understood. I think it's a fair point, and I think the question is whether or not the fund, the expense, quote, let's call it reimbursement, is something that people think is going to be coming out of the pocket of the public schools of Brookline, when they're not going to be the users during those periods of time we're talking about, or whether or not it's going to be the actual renters. And if it's rec programs, whether or not rec is going to be able to cover the costs via a reimbursement to the general fund from the revenue they're taking in. I don't think there's an idea that the public schools are going to be coming out of pocket for this after-school building usage that we're talking about.
I just think it is worth the talk, like, explicitly saying, though, that rec is one of the biggest users at no transfer, right? And that's that a logical consequence of this might be thinking about changing that.
So I'm not understanding where that goes.
Where it goes in your document?
No, where it goes operationally. Are you suggesting that rec pays rent to the public schools of Brookline? The overall comment about these facilities that they're town buildings. They're
Yeah.
not school buildings.
Right, but if rec is, for example, reimbursing for overhead to the general fund out of the rec revolver, why wouldn't rec be, for example, reimbursing utilities that are used after hours to the general fund to cover, because PSB, right now PSB, the entirety of utilities is coming out of, like, any extra utilities is coming out of the PSB operating budget. So like we're paying we're estimated to pay additional $400,000 for next year compared to this year. And our utilities have increased dramatically, like everybody's has. But again, my point is that if rec is taking advantage of the building after hours, then perhaps rec should be also contributing through the revolver to offset the utilities.
Fair point. Carol, you want to weigh in on that?
Just
Yeah,
like a renter would be in terms of rental fees, I guess. Sorry.
I think that's the whole purpose for coming up with an occupancy and service agreement. So instead of trying to pick off these issues one by one, there's a more comprehensive look at costs associated with operating the buildings and holistically figuring out how to properly allocate them among the current users or the future users. So what you're bringing up, Mariah, is exhibit 1 as to why we really need to do a better job of having all of this thought through and documented to be consistent throughout the town.
So Carol, I'm curious from your perspective, if these occupancy agreements, the way it's proposed, is required, or whether you could do this with kind of a robust MOU, or whether, at the end of the day, it's kind of the same thing with a different name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is to have a template, a standard holistic template that the building division is saying to everyone, this is how we're doing it. And if there's specific circumstances within a particular facility's operations, like I know the fire department has certain specific things it is responsible for within the fire stations that the building department doesn't test or have operational and maintenance responsibilities for, then that template gets modified. But by calling it an MOU, I worry that it would be a department by department negotiation. And I think that it should really be, and this is again well established in the real estate world, you have landlords who have their standard leases, and then you'll modify them as necessary. I think it's important that the concepts remain consistent, whether we're talking about the building department and a town department, or the building department and the PSB.
Got it.
Does this go back, Carol, to your concept that you expressed last week, that the liability or the expenses should rest with the entity that has control? And I guess the way that I am thinking of this is that you want the incentives to be properly assigned. Taking your example, Mariah, of reducing the temperature from 72 degrees to 68 degrees or 66 degrees. If the schools do that, they should be incentivized to do that. So they should realize the savings from that. If buildings are being used after hours by an outside entity, by a third party, those costs should be assigned. If they're being used by a town or school entity, those costs should be recognized and assigned. I mean, to me, it seems that if you can do it, this is all about trying to get the incentives lined up in a way that it um, that costs are covered and that people are incentivized to save costs.
Yeah. So sometimes the incentive is the avoidance of additional charges. I mean, with
Yeah.
utilities, traditionally, a facility would be assigned in a lease standard business hours. And then there would be charges over and beyond operations after standard business hours. Similarly, if you install a special piece of equipment, say, I mean, I do healthcare like an MRI that needs its own HVAC system, or there's some server that is installed in a town building that has special HVAC demands, then those, we have to make sure those things are charged accordingly. So that the decision to install that piece of equipment or take on responsibility of that equipment extends beyond the initial acquisition cost and includes the operating costs. I mean, that was always my concern with the way the schools were sizing their new schools. They weren't asking, what can we afford to operate? Which is why the AC had recommended an operating override for repair and maintenance at the time of the Pierce School debt exclusion, because you can't separate the issues of what are you acquiring, what are you choosing to operate, and what is the operational cost associated with it. So I'm trying to what's the word I want? I want to sync up the decisions better. So we aren't making a decision to go down a path and then in
Right.
the future say, oh my God, what about the operating costs associated with it?
Right. And that makes a ton of sense to me as well. Which then would support, I think, Carol, in your two options, that's more in line with option B, right? Because I think there is some risk that if the costs are taken off above the line, there's just less visibility, or maybe there's a way to work around that. But for that reason, I do like the I do like option B for its incentive alignment and visibility of the costs as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if on, and you know, this isn't fully thought out, but I don't know if with an option A, there's a way to have a above the line allocation for operational purposes.
Hmm.
So people see what it is that they're incurring and that, oh, by the way, this is why things are being, this is why you have left what you have. I mean, it really needs to be thought through more thoroughly and robustly than was done in coming up with this memo. This memo, I think, is a good first stab, but it's certainly, I think there's a lot to consider.
As long as Chaz is here, I want to ask a question that was posed to me by someone on the advisory committee. And that is whether or not, if things are below the line, regardless of what they are, and it therefore goes into a town school allocation, does that mean that whatever the schools get, if it's below the line, even if it's something like benefits, that the school committee has the ability to essentially use that money for different purposes?
Yes.
I see. Interesting.
And I guess the question is, who is legally on the hook for those benefits? And I guess it's the town.
Well,
So-
I think that's an interesting question, right? On the one hand, yes, the town, right? The town and the schools, we are a symbiotic entity, but ultimately at the end of the day, the town of Brookline Public School Department is a independent entity of the town of Brookline. And so, yes, we can't escape our potential liabilities if the schools wind up incurring them. The town can't plead that we don't have any responsibility.
We didn't do it. They did
Yeah,
it.
but so they could get
It's Mariah's
allocated.
fault.
Yeah, they could get allocated the money and decide to use it for other programmatic ideas and say, well, to the town, well, you've got to pay those additional benefits as well.
Theoretically, they could do
I
that.
mean,
In
come on,
practice, I
Seth.
think that, right. Yeah, I was going to say
That-
in
hey, listen,
practice.
All these
The
bad actors
uh,
over on the school committee who
person-
are
the person
allocating
who-
benefits for like
The
programmatic.
person who posed that question to me was David Pollock. Okay,
That
and
what
so-
the schools would do that?
so, I'm sorry, that was his perspective, and that was his concern. And so that's why I'm asking it. And
I mean,
I
can't
appreciate
some of
the
this be
answer.
managed through the MOU structure, right? There's a commitment to do X, Y, and Z with this funding.
You don't need the
Or,
benefits are a contractual obligation. Like there's
sorry,
no
I'm not talking
way.
about benefits right now. I'm
Okay.
talking about the building specific. I'm talking about the buildings. I know we got sidetracked here for a second, but specifically with regards to the buildings, right? So we're talking about what's above the line and below the line. And I think that there is benefit in having the incentives aligned, right? So the example of the temperature as it's set across the school buildings. If the schools decide that they want to keep the temperature at 70 or 72, then there should be a cost to the schools for that. Or if they want to lower it to 78, they should benefit from that decision, right? I think that's important. And also, some of the points that have been raised in the past around ensuring that maintenance is done at a certain cadence to ensure that you don't pay more for it later on. That could either be managed through MOU if there's a disagreement about that between the building department and the schools, or it could be addressed with putting those dollars above the line. So that's what I was trying to get at. And maybe I'm
But I have a question about this, all right? And I know we're kind of getting off topic, but since people are raising these issues, so let's assume that we have a situation where, okay, there's an allocation of costs at the beginning of the fiscal year, town meeting votes it, schools agree to pay it, and then schools decide they're going to lower their temperature, they're going to change the temperature settings, and they start saving money. At what point do you actually calculate the savings and give it to the schools? Because, you're talking about a fiscal year, and if you don't give it to them until after the close of the books, it becomes part of what? The budget for not the next year, because that's already been voted, but for the year after? How does that mechanism work?
Well, we've been talking about this now, and it's been my hope that we would start to reduce to reduce the temperature now as proof of concept and accrue it, like essentially be able to then have it show up in the budget book at a reduced amount for 27. That if we could prove some sort of reduction, like even if it was a very conservative amount for 27, like not as a reduction from where we are now, but even if it was like, you're not going to go up by 400,000 next year, but if you can show that you can reduce it by some lesser amount, again, like trying to see where that could go. I don't know necessarily how it would work though. Like maybe it could only be the year after that, Cliff. To me, the point isn't necessarily to accrue it in the immediate future. It's to be able to show a trend where you can reliably budget for it. And so like that, it's not like you're taking those savings to go do something else with them tomorrow. It's that you're hoping for a different budget in the future. Does that?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it answers my question, because I think that you're going to need to kind of build it into a future year with some sort. Yeah, Carol, you're.
Yeah, I can't find my hand raising thing on Zoom.
It's under reactions, believe it or not.
Oh, it's under
No, it's
reactions,
not
okay.
intuitive.
I think one of the issues is that even though we have contracts for electricity and gas that set rates, our actual usage is highly dependent on environmental conditions, among other things. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there's some acts of God or other things in those utility contracts that leave us exposed. So it's very, the expectation is that as the new buildings come online, our utility bills are going to continue to go up. And we may be able to slow the rate of increase, but I would caution against any particular periods, you know, lowering the thermostat for just a few months being used to project the next year's utility charges. You could certainly use it to slow the rate of increase, but I wouldn't look at it as a potential reduction in moving forward. You're just trying to stop it from going up as fast.
Maybe we should park this for the time being, because
Yeah.
it's going to have to be analyzed and considered,
Right.
and we're not gonna figure out.
Can I bring it back to an earlier topic, I think, in this, Sadaf, which
Sure.
was this discussion of above the line, below the line?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the school committee, but in my opinion, the building department, or I'll say repair and maintenance funds for the buildings would probably do better to be taken above the line, so as to not be subjected, like they should be first off the top, because we are preserving a resource that is a shared resource and is an offset for the town's overall financial health. And so because the 2.5% that is taken now, year-to-year increase on repair and maintenance, has proven to be repeatedly insufficient for what building department staff believe the buildings need on a year-to-year increase to that budget, I actually think that there is something to be said about taking it off the top and making it not subject to the financial pressures that go against, that make departments have to, or I'll say the town and the schools have to choose what to prioritize.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And also I think that the utilities piece doesn't necessarily belong above the line. In other words, like this whole category of like building maintenance and operations could be, maybe this is messier, I don't know, and I don't know how other communities do it, but I think, Carol, this is what you were saying, that you could divide those up and some of them might be appropriately placed above the line. I think maintenance is an interesting one in that, as you said, Mariah, because I think it's difficult, I think, for the schools when you are given these choices and your primary objective and your mandate is to deliver services to students, and I think does that belong in that set of choices? I'm not sure if it does.
Well, and the same thing for the town, right? Do we
Yes, I agree.
paint the town hall, or do we, run the senior center bus or whatever, right? Fill in potholes. I think that there's just like, there's a lot of demands, and in some ways it shouldn't be subject to the demands.
Yeah, and utilities are part of repair and maintenance. And if you are able to reduce utilities, then there's more available for the town school split below the line if you keep utilities above the line. So there is still an incentive system in place, even if something is above the line.
Yeah, it's just less direct, I think, you're right. Everybody will see the money in some capacity, but it's less direct. Chaz, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to make sort of a more acute point to what Carol was saying, which is, this year, when the allocation of revenue came out and the school's number was much lower than it has historically been, the narrative that immediately sprung up was the town is stiffing the schools. And that's absolutely untrue, right? What happened was above the line costs ate up the revenue allocation to both town and schools. But that didn't stop the narrative from immediately being, why is the town stiffing the schools? So I have some doubt that people intrinsically understand that when costs are above the line, that means that there's less available. It seems that, it then becomes a sort of political point or political football. And that's part of why, I certainly agree, frankly, that it would be great to have public buildings not subject to those pressures. But when I look at how that's gone from benefits, where, there is both the sense of, we don't understand how this number gets to be where it is, and there's less direct responsibility for the number being what it is, right? Which is why we've been talking about allocating healthcare below the line, allocating benefits below the line. For one thing, the town is a bit of a free rider under the current system. Not a big free rider, but somewhat. It would be fairer to the schools if it was below the line. But also, then the consequences for hiring and letting people go would be clearer. And so we've kind of dug into the pros and cons of this, and ultimately, I've tended to come out more in favor of things being kept below the line because you have that direct responsibility. You know exactly why you're paying what you're paying. You can see how it impacts your budget if you do more or do less. And there's less opportunity when those things are shared to say, where did the money go? Oh, we don't know where this money went. We know perfectly well where this money went. It's just not convenient to say it.
Right, thanks. Dick?
Yeah, in light of that comment, I'd like to circle back to David Pollock's question. And if the argument is that by putting everything below the line, for example, benefits, there is a direct incentive, there has to be some mechanism that ensures that the entity that is making the decision pays those benefits. And there's a disconnect, I think, in our legal structure as the town of Brookline. If I'm on the school side and I hire additional people, even though the benefits are theoretically assigned to me, ultimately they have to be paid by the town legally. So how do we deal with that issue? If I reduce my staffing, I'm also reducing benefits. That's money that the town is saving ultimately, because it's the town that's cutting the check to the GIC. Mm-hmm. So the above the line, below the line, it seems to me is there's ambiguity in it. It's not a clear-cut yes, you make the decision and you pay, because you can make the decision, but you actually are not the one that's legally obligated to pay. Or am I
I don't
missing
think that's
something?
true. I don't think that's true at all, Dick. So I've been, like, in my understanding, for example, when staff are talking about this, staff know, like Melissa's carrying forward, she'll say, like, I'm presuming X number of staff on the town side and X number of staff on the school side. And so, like, that's all of that is being sort of attributed in the back end. So even if the public is less aware of it, the staff are well aware of the implications against their allocation of adding additional staff on.
Right,
Yes.
but as David Pollock pointed out in his question to Cliff, if the schools decided, look, we want to hire, just theoretically, we want to hire 100 more people rather than using our quote unquote allocation, our benefit allocation for that, they could do it.
How could they do that?
They would just do it. They spend the money that they want to spend. The town allocates them. Town meeting allocates the schools X million dollars, and it's my understanding that the schools then have discretion on how to spend it. And I think
But we
that was
have an obligation to cover based on, like, there's an obligation of benefits. Like, I guess I don't know if maybe things have changed since David, and I get the sense that perhaps, and Chaz maybe can comment on this, that staff are doing maybe handling the number of sort of keeping track of what's going on with the insurance changes year to year more tightly. So it may be that this has just changed from David's time on the school committee.
Yeah, so Cliff,
expenses above the line eliminate this particular issue. So we're talking about if you put it below the line versus keeping it above the line. And look, to me, this is really a legal question, and then it becomes a moral issue for the school committee. And I just want to talk about Chaz's comment about the school's not getting the narrative that the schools aren't getting an increase from the town. Because I've heard that from a number of different places now, and I've heard it from places where I shouldn't be hearing it from. You know, people who know the facts of what are going on and yet continue that narrative, which to me is got plenty of adjectives to use, but I just think it's just not the right way for the different sides of the town to be characterizing reality. And I think part of the issue going forward, regardless of where we put expenses, is to have a better presentation of what is coming in and where it is going, for that is easily digestible for people. And I know it's all there in the budget book. I know it's there because I've looked at it in the last several days. But, you know, I'm someone who's willing to look at the budget book and to go beyond the town school partnership, you know, blurb, and actually go and dig through things. Most people aren't willing to do that. I'm not sure most elected people are willing to do that. Certainly not most town meeting members are willing to do that. So I think that, and maybe it's, you know, when people stand up and talk about the budget at town meeting, you know, folks who are not restrained by the moderator to, you know, 15 seconds to talk, to actually go through for that particular audience. Because again, education is really important. And this is critical for people to be thinking that the schools aren't getting an increase in funds this year through the regular process is, to me, that's scary.
Chaz?
And
Sorry.
the conversation from the school committee should be to the public, here's what's happening. Here's the money that we are, quote unquote, we're getting, but because it's coming off the top, because it's going for benefits, you know, it's taking up, as it is on the town side, virtually all the increase in funds. Maybe that's been said when I haven't been hearing it, but it has not been said at meetings that I have listened to.
We have said it. We have said it, but I don't know that I couldn't even tell you myself exactly like, oh, the amount to the town was X, but Y was taken up by health insurance benefits. I don't have the clarity of that, but I have, and I know because I've said it myself at meetings, like the dollars have gone up, but the health insurance and other costs, the above the line costs are significant. And so it's been said, but again, I couldn't tell you exactly the kind of math that you're saying, Cliff, because that's not the way the math is given to us. And I certainly haven't gone off to, you know, rogue calculate my own on that, so.
But you also know that from the school committee, it has been said that the schools aren't getting an increase in their town allocation. When does that ever happen? You know, what town
But
doesn't?
we aren't getting an allocation to the department side, just like the town isn't. The fact is that the benefits are, you're right, but that's not the way that the budget has been talked about generally, Cliff, on either side. So what you're proposing is a change in the way we talk about it, which is fine. But like when we say, oh, it's been allocated, like the health insurance has gone up and that's where the overall increase in the budget is going, is a different way than saying everyone's getting more money, because they're not, it's shown in our budget. Like
Yeah,
you're
well, the
asking us to talk about the budget in a way that no one presents the budget.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't buy that. I'm sorry. The message that's going out to the community is the schools are getting screwed. That's the message that's being reflected.
I'm not sure where you've gotten that from or who you're quoting, because I've never heard anybody at a school committee meeting, if that's your implication, say the schools are getting screwed.
No, that has not been said. But what has been said is the schools aren't getting an increase in money, and that is, you know, towns don't do that. That's been said.
So, okay, so Chaz, why don't you make your comment? And I actually think I want to try to land this conversation on the buildings, and I think the next topic we should tackle is the town school partnership conversation, because we're talking about all the above the line, below the line questions, which I think are better addressed in that conversation. And I wonder if we can bring those two things together. So, Chaz, do you want to make your comment?
Sure, thanks. Just really quick. I agree with Mariah that I think David Pollock's concern is theoretically possible, but not plausible. I think that if you're talking about that, then you're already in kind of like a Brockton level crisis where you have a school committee or a superintendent spending money they don't have for things that they can't possibly for things they can't possibly fund. And then, sticking the community with the bag. Like, yes, is that possible? Yes. I mean, it's happened in other communities in recent memory. It happened in North Andover. It happened in Brockton. It does happen. But that's a systemic failure. And I don't think we have that here. I don't. I think we have strong organizational structures in place that prevent that from happening. And so, I think it's theoretical, but not plausible. And again, continuing to have strong controls in place, continuing to have strong documented town school procedures is the way you address that potential concern. What happens if the schools overspend their allocation? What happens if we say that we're going to spend it on this, but then we don't? Et cetera. All of that is designed to avoid that situation of then coming to the annual town meeting in our case and saying, well, we know we said we were going to spend it on X, but we spent it on Y. So now we need a budget amendment to take it out of your budget, and there's no money. That's what happened to Brockton, and that's not what happens here. There was a concern in FY25 that it was happening, that all of a sudden there was an overage, but it wasn't because of misfeasance or malfeasance on the school committee or the leadership's part. It was a genuine situation of it was an accounting situation. It was not a situation of a deliberate decision to spend money that they didn't have. So I understand where that's coming from, but I just want to reiterate to folks that I don't think that's plausible under the circumstances. And the way to control for that is to have good structures in place that are not reliant on good people, but are reliant on good systems. And I think we have those, and we need to continue to foster them, which is why I think these recommendations for more documentation, more agreements, more things in writing, more accountability is really important.
Okay. So one of the things that I think would be helpful, I know in the conversation that happened last week when I was away, the discussion was actually to put the building appendix that we just looked at, and couple it with the rentals document. And I wonder if it's actually better placed in the financial model discussion, because it really does go into really what the nature of how you would account for these things and components of what would be an MOU or an occupancy agreement, whatever we call it, what those would look like. And so, I'm curious what the committee thinks about that, and whether we can come to an agreement on whether one of these options looks better than the other, or whether this requires another turn, or whether we defer the details of this, which, Carol also said that more work is required to really land this. Or whether we lump this together into the recommendation that is included in the financial model document, which we're going to get to next, to be tackled in more detail with a follow-up study committee, which is the recommendation of that document. Cliff?
Yeah, so last week when we were talking about this, we didn't have a financial document to
Yeah, I
to
know.
look at. I think it's a fine option. I personally am totally agnostic. It may make more sense there, but this was our placeholder because we had no place else to put it.
Yep, I get it. Okay. Other comments on the building document, on the appendix specifically?
No, I would just echo your comment and Cliff's comment in a sense, putting this larger issue into the rental document is kind of like the tail wagging the dog a bit. And I think it makes more sense in the financial model.
Okay. And so then perhaps how we refine this is well, like I said, we'll get to the financial model document next. But to then include this as an appendix to that document to say, here are different ways that this could be crafted, alternative to an MOU, and then modify that document to say that for buildings specifically, maybe this requires more of a more robust legal construct, just given the complexity of the sort of nature of managing the buildings, for example. So, okay.
So if we're gonna go that direction, we can take everything out of the facilities rental document that we just put in, and we're not gonna have to revote it or talk about it again.
That's right, because then that will
Yes.
revert back to its prior version. Sorry, Cliff, I know you invested
No,
time
no,
in
that's fine. That's, it's
that
perfect.
probably saves you time in the long term.
Well,
There's some inherent
Same
sunk costs,
data,
but
just going.
Could I ask whether Carol is comfortable with?
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think it does belong in the other place instead of here with the more narrow issue about the schools. I think that makes perfect sense to me. Thank you.
Okay, all right, great. All right, so let's shift gears. And I know that I have the outline next on the agenda, but we're gonna skip to the town financial model recommendation. Did people have an opportunity to read this? Are people prepared to
Yes.
discuss it? Okay. All right, great. So I'll open it up to feedback and commentary. But actually, maybe I'll just sort of lay some groundwork, which is that I was hoping that we would be able to make some additional progress on this topic over the last few weeks, but everyone has been busy. I think there was a real focus. I know there was real focus on getting the budget books over the line. And so this is where we are. And I did want to include something in the final report on this topic, which is basically there's more work to be done, right? But with some high level recommendations on direction and what needs to be studied further. So feedback, comments, thoughts on this document? Nothing?
I had printed out the recommendations at the end and left them on my printer.
All right, well, I can pull them up.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
We're good.
So now I had one quick question. I think there's one comment where you said, or it said, the committee believes there are 4 broad matters. Was there I see 3 categories. Was there a 4th, or am I misreading that?
Yeah, sorry, that's a typo. Because there was a 4th, and then I removed the 4th, and I didn't
see.
update it. Yeah. So originally I was going to include, the additional question around, what's in the recommendation around the special education and like whether there's a different way for us to think about how that's funded. I can add that back in. It's not really addressed deeply in the document, so I pulled it out. But that's why there is that inconsistency. So I can fix that. Mariah.
It's a little bit of a repeat from what we were just talking about, but the second one that's shown on the screen right now, just this question of like, I'm not totally clear in my mind that universally moving categories below the line where possible is actually the right approach. I think that there should be a rethinking of what's above the line and what's below the line. But I don't know that below the line wherever possible is actually the way to go. I mean, there's just trade-offs, right? As we've talked about exhaustively, but that one was one when I read this the first time I thought, well, I don't know. So
It feels too broad.
yeah, just like there might be more nuance to it than just below the line is better, as we've talked about, right? Like the question of just like the building, the repair and maintenance. And I think it's this, and I think some of the things we've talked about, right? The questions of, for example, if it's moved below the line and you have a savings, are you therefore retaining the savings, or are they returning, for example, to be reallocated? There's just a lot of different things that go into this that I think is worth talking about. So like should the financial model be reconsidered? Yes, like Cliff and I have been sort of singing this for many years, um, but but I don't know that that's exactly the way I would frame it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if you take a look at what is above the line, I mean, benefits are one thing, but, debt service or payments to the MBTA or, Norfolk County, all those types of things, the reserve fund, that, I'm not sure they belong below the line.
Yes, I think that's fair. And that's why I listed it could include, and I understand that actually, as you guys talked through this, maybe it wasn't clear. My where possible was really intended to be healthcare benefits insurance. But I can rework that. I
But
think that's
even as we talk about, again, like the building repair and maintenance, that again, maybe shouldn't be moved below the line. It shouldn't be considered below the line because it's something that we say it needs to be budgeted for no matter what, just like general insurance, just like our Norfolk County assessment, right? Like the question is what are the things that we say no matter what, they're just costs that absolutely need to be baked in and taken above all else. And then the trade-off of where there might be incentives or creations of incentives to have people rethink about some of those costs. But anyways, I don't think that it's just those things. I think there might be things below the line that we might want to consider moving above the line.
Yep, that's fair. Okay, so I can rework that. And maybe the reframing is just reassess what is above and below the line more generically, but then
But I would say, Sadaf, that it is important to at least get the concept across that you want to create the appropriate incentives for people.
Yep.
And I think putting aside David Pollock's question, healthcare and benefits would be a below the line item. Because
I agree on that one. Yeah, and I feel pretty strongly about that one.
General insurance,
yeah, take it or leave it, but that is one of the things that could be moved. Okay. All right. So I can make those updates around taking a look at which categories are above and below the line and being
utilities might be below the line.
Yeah.
As we've discussed. And maybe that gets substituted for general insurance, unless the activities of a town department or the school department are causing increases in general insurance.
They are. They have significantly, with the construction of the new buildings, has raised our property insurance rates. That, along with having to insure them at 100% of replacement value. So that is an issue in the current town school partnership split, because those increases are shared 50-50, though the sources of them aren't 50-50. So
interesting. So maybe we leave, I mean, this is just what are the things that could be moved? So based on that, maybe we leave insurance, but we add utilities, and this is things to be explored, and change the heading of that category. Okay. Does that make sense to people? Are we comfortable with those updates?
Well, you can't go wrong when you say you have to explore it.
I know it's sufficiently squishy that.
Can I ask a question? Wouldn't the things we're talking about for number 2 just consolidate into number 1? Like evaluating an alternative. You're basically just talking about evaluating an alternative, right?
So the alternative is really about, I mean, I think it is important to distinguish, I mean, to the extent that maybe we reframe it as to the extent that we stay with our existing town school split model, reevaluate the categories, because the idea of evaluating an alternative, there are complexities with that approach as well. So I don't want to lump those together, because I think that this idea of above and below the line is substantial enough to call out separately.
I read the
if-
first, number here, as drawing the distinction between a couple of the communities, Brookline, one of them that have a split versus a couple of the other communities that you discussed at the beginning that redo it every year. And that's what I understood number one to be when you're talking about the current model.
Yeah, so the
that-
objective of number one, and you guys can tell me if this is what you gleaned from it, was to say that based on how other communities are doing it in Brookline's current situation, I think we want to just validate and pressure test our existing model, right?
Right.
The way that other communities do this, with that growth cap by department or by category, has its benefits, right? But I think that is, you need to really understand that better because I'm sure it all has its own issues as well. And I think it is worth taking a look at this because we have had this model for a long time. And I'm somebody who believes in taking another look at things just to make sure it's still the right thing to do, given where we are today. So that was the intention of this one. Dick, is that what you gleaned from it? Was that?
Yeah, no, I read the first bullet or the first numbered paragraph here is if you go up to the top of your document, as being the distinction between Brookline and, I don't know, was it Belmont or some other community, and maybe it was another document that was in the packet where a document talked about different models of proceeding year to year, ours being this town school partnership split model versus a redoing the budget model that some other communities had. And I saw this first numbered paragraph, or I read this first numbered paragraph as being that broad issue.
Yes, that this was intended to be the other approach. And then this one is we should just validate that we still want to continue with the split model, essentially.
And I saw paragraph number 2 as being a different question.
I agree. Yes. So Mariah, I would prefer to keep them separate. I do see them as two different things. I agree with Dick. Okay. All right. Other so I think based on the conversation we had on buildings, perhaps what we do with this section is this building maintenance, upkeep, capital projects, instead of lumping this into the MOU, have a way of elaborating on this and saying that this is a very complex department and area and function overall, and that this might warrant additional, a different construct or the working agreement to look different in this case. And as an example, include then the document that Carol included, probably have to refine that a little bit, as an appendix and reference that. What do people think? I feel like I'm losing people. I'm losing everyone. Is everyone losing steam?
Yeah. No, I was curious here about the inclusion. I mean, we've talked about benefits administration, we've talked about building maintenance, groundskeeping and sanitation, public health, public safety. Have we discussed that, or and I've missed it, or is this just sort of a list of potential?
A list of potential. This is just
Okay.
all of the departments that have some interface with the
Okay.
schools
Okay.
that would need to be considered.
Okay. Okay. All right.
And then the last one is around departmental consolidation.
Oh,
We
I
talked
wanted to make, sorry, a comment on that one. Sorry, do you mind just scrolling back up to 3?
Sure.
Why, what, Oh, no, never mind. It's there. I think okay, never mind. Ignore me.
Okay. And then the departmental consolidation, this is really continuing to look for efficiencies. But I called out here specifically that yeah, this would need to be done on a timeline that's reasonable and that on which obligations and requirements that the schools have of these departments would be addressed. Because I know there's been some concerns about how this would be, what that experience would be for the schools if these were fully consolidated on the town side. So it needs to be done in a way that allows for those issues to be resolved.
Can I ask a question? Why does this say that they would be consolidated on the town side? Because I'll give an example. The building department, PSB pays for like the vast majority of salaries. I guess I'm just curious if there is one side or the other that is using the services much more extensively, why wouldn't they be placed on the side that is the primary using agency as opposed to by just by fiat on the town side?
I mean, Carol, you have your hand raised, and then Cliff. I'm gonna step away for 1 second, and I'll be right back. But please continue to.
Well, I'm gonna just explain about building management, and how it typically works in the private sector and in the nonprofit sector. Most of those personnel are employed in managing these buildings and maintaining the buildings. So it's the asset that it follows what I was saying earlier about whoever has the liability needs to have the control, and whoever has the risk and the financial responsibility needs to have the control. So what you almost industry standard is all the people who are employed either in an oversight role or directly on an hourly basis in managing and maintaining a building, that is part of the occupancy cost that the users or tenants of that building support. So just because a company might occupy 2/3 of an office building downtown doesn't mean that they have control of the management of the building. It means that within their rent, the calculation of occupancy costs and operating expenses includes fully loading their share of the management costs. Does that help, Mariah?
Well, you're talking about in a tenant situation, specifically in regards, specifically in regard, no, hold on, specifically in regards to the building department. And my question was about for all of the services that are here. This one is about all of these services. Why is the assumption in the second line of it that they all go to the town side? Like, shouldn't it be just based on use? And you'll see here, buildings actually isn't even listed. I only was the one who mentioned buildings, but there's IT, legal services, et cetera.
What exactly would that mean? Being on one side or the other? I mean, this is a
Well,
question
in practice, I think it's meant
consolidation.
reporting structure and who essentially is who they're reporting to, and then who's paying for services. Right? So like the PSB is transferring funds every year to the town for some of the payroll services and some of these other things. And so, like, but for example, if there, and I'm just sort of like wondering, like, say if payroll was 80% PSB employees who are being paid and 20% town or whatever it is, it's just some large amount in the other way. Why wouldn't we sort of assume that it's going to go whichever way it goes?
Isn't the question really where the expertise is?
Well, where do you think the expertise sits?
I don't know how many, I don't know how many payroll people. Let's take payroll staffing. As I understood this item, the question was finding efficiencies, and if the town has the staffing and the computers and the back office to do payroll for the town and the schools, then you'd want to have those people do it. If I guess what you're saying is if the schools have it, let the schools do it. But it shouldn't be based on the number of people who are using it. I think the question would be, where is the expertise to do the job most efficiently?
Well,
I
I think
think
there's
that's
multiple
fair, but the reason I structured it this way was because the schools are a department of the
No,
overall.
they're not. The schools are not a department. It's an independent school district, as Chaz alluded to earlier. You could
Okay.
make the shrug, but it actually is legally independent, an independent agency.
I mean, I think that's fair, but I guess the question is, do you want to manage IT for the whole town?
I don't know what PSB wants to do, and I don't think this group knows either way. Not maybe the town doesn't want to manage it for PSB either. I guess my only point is that at the beginning of this, the first sentence basically says there's a presumption that they're going to be managed by the town, and I'm just saying that there might be great reasons that something should be managed by the schools, and that we should just not presume that. That's all I'm pointing out.
I think that's probably.
I think,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I think Dick's right, okay, Mariah. The service should be provided by the side of, if you're not going to call yourself part of the town, okay, by the entity that has the expertise. And it certainly seems like the expertise of the public schools of Brookline is the education of children, not the management of buildings, not legal services, not payroll.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Cliff. I'm just saying that this document shouldn't presume that. We should let
Okay, so
the actual investigation conclude that.
What's the wording you would say instead? Evaluate full consolidation
Of the following departments to streamline up processes. That's all.
That's fine.
That's fine. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
fine.
my objective here is, I actually don't care where it lives. I guess, I was making some assumptions around where I thought it logically lived, and I think it's fair to say that, I'm not the decision maker in that. But regardless, the point here is that they should be managed together because it's more streamlined, it is more cost effective, and from a process and standards and consistency point of view, I think that's a better approach. I'm okay updating that. I think it's fine.
And what I was responding to, Mariah, was what I understood you to be saying was that whoever is using it more should be where it resides.
And what I'm saying is, I don't know what all the different salient
that's fine.
features are. Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
The other thing is for your 4-H, you say except for collective bargaining, and I would argue probably also special education, because that is a niche use of legal services. But again, I don't think this needs to be particularly drawn out here. I just think that like the idea that we're going to look at these things is fine. And just not determine what's exactly going to happen at this point.
Yeah, that's fine.
Should HR be on this list, or is it clear that you need different HR departments?
No, I mean, we should put HR. HR should probably be on this list.
I'm also not sure, like we talked about custodial, like custodial is something too, right? I mean, there are things, if you're going to talk about all of them, you might as well talk about them to, go through it all.
We can add custodial too.
And I think there's one really gross error here. And that is it should start with A again rather than G.
Oh, I will fix that. Word is very quirky.
Please do.
I get very confused about the numbering. Okay.
And I just following up on Mariah's comment about adding custodial, you could fudge this and say including the following, or potentially including the following, and that would perhaps you wouldn't have to consider these, and you could potentially consider others.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
And we'll see you all in 3 years to see what's actually happened.
All right, Cliff.
Yeah, can we move to number 5?
Yes.
All right, so, I was certainly on board with looking at the possibility of establishing a reserve fund last year or a year and a half ago, whenever the heck it was. I think the language should be evaluate the utility instead of the possibility, because it's certainly possible to do. I'm just not convinced that it makes sense to do it for a variety of reasons. So I would just appreciate that little language change.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. And I'm not sure it's needed either, but we also didn't really dig into it. So, okay. Okay. Any other comments about this one?
Nope. Thank you very much for pulling this all together.
Yeah, of course. I think there's some appendices here which are pretty straightforward that I'll add, which aren't in here yet, but I will pull that together. All right. With those edits, do we think that we know enough to be able to vote on this? And actually, is Chaz still on? We lost Chaz.
Let's
Okay.
see.
That's okay. Do you think we can vote on this, or does this group need to see another draft?
Well, you can always move it and see what happens.
Fair enough. I move to vote on this with the edits that we discussed.
I'll second that.
All right.
How are you going to be adding in the building memo?
Yep. So what I was going to do with the building memo is to say, and there's a section, establish clear working relationships, cite that this probably requires something more robust than an MOU, given the complexity of the function. And then refer to Carol's appendix as like, here's some of the considerations, here's some options on how this could be tackled. So that's how I was thinking about addressing it. So then all the information is in here, it is contemplated, and then it is for the follow-up study committee to dig into it and land the plane, so to speak. Does that
Great.
work?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Will
should we
that
vote?
be, will that be an expansion of B, or does this now get elevated to its own paragraph 3.5?
I was gonna try to expand 3B if I could. Just to keep it a little bit more streamlined.
Okay.
Because there are not a lot of things that are contemplated in the appendix that I think touch other components as well. But they are addressed. I think if you made it into its own paragraph, I think it would be a little messy because it touches above the line, below the line, some of the accounting around this, and that was my thought. Okay. All right. So let's take a vote. Dick,
Yes.
Cliff.
Yes.
All right, Jeff,
Yes.
Mariah.
Abstain.
Okay, and I vote yes. So I will make these updates. I will recirculate this by tomorrow morning at the latest. So everybody can take a look at it, and I'm gonna try to bring it to my goal is to bring it to the committee, full committee on Wednesday. Okay. All right, and then if there are additional edits as this group wants to make on Wednesday, we can do that. All right. All right, moving on to the next topic, the CLA report response. I want to make sure people are ready to talk about this document. I think there are a couple of comments in here that got truncated on the side here.
If you could go again to the recommendations, and I know that there was a paragraph prior to the very end that said we don't really know what happened with respect to certain issues. And I mean, as I read this, I think it seems that it might be as far as we can go at this point.
Yeah. So this is the recommendation. So I talked about, the actions that have been taken. Oh, actually, so let me skip down. So these are the updates that I had in terms of these actions. There wasn't an update on these two, so I think we need to track that down. And then I mentioned the IDEA grant, and I actually wrote something additional this afternoon that didn't make it into this version, unfortunately, unless I need to refresh my page. I don't know if you guys have the same version as I do here.
Yeah, it's the however paragraph.
Yeah. Okay. So then this is sort of the recommendation. This will be updated before this is published. So, our recommendation as a subcommittee, which we talked about several weeks ago, was to do a follow-up. CLA has been contacted. They quoted a price and said that they could get to this before the election. And now the process is related to securing funding. So Chaz has added this to the select board agenda for Tuesday. As far as I know, there isn't a statement of work or a proposed statement of work related to this, but I'm not sure. I did ask that question, and then it would have to go to a reserve fund transfer if the advisory committee decides to fund this.
Was there a specific date it would be available?
So the goal, the request that Chaz made of CLA was that they would do this prior to the election. But we've been kind of talking about this now for several weeks, so time is.
Yeah, but
short.
like May 1st is prior to the election.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
not sure.
Okay.
And I think we've lost Chaz. You guys can confirm.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Are you looking for a vote on this today?
I mean, I'm happy to wait on this until we get more information. I was hoping to bring this to the broader subcommittee tomorrow, or on Wednesday, but
The full committee? You mean?
yes, I'm sorry, the full
Yep.
committee on Wednesday. But if people aren't comfortable voting on this, I had made some additional edits to this document. They weren't that material. I'm happy to circulate those as well.
So I would just say that you could certainly mark a draft. You could certainly present it on Wednesday, but by then, Chaz will have presented to the select board. He's gonna have, input to add to this.
Yeah.
But I don't see any reason to not get it started. It's gonna be cleaned up and revised a little bit anyway.
Yeah, that's fair.
So maybe the vote is to authorize this draft or cleaned up as much as it can be in the next day to be submitted to the full ENRC
Yeah, and then,
for review
yeah.
and comment, and including comment by Chaz. And I would
Yeah,
support that.
again, then if it needs to get refined again, it's gonna get refined and be presented back to the full committee, so.
Yeah, I would support that.
Okay, good. I like that because I want to keep moving this forward, just given the limitations on time. So
Yeah, but I mean, as I look at this, I didn't really consider it to be the end product to be voted on.
yeah, I think that's fair. There's more. There's gaps in the data that we need to fill in. So
Okay.
All right, good. So so then I'll make a motion to take this draft to at least be shared with the full committee on Wednesday as a draft and process while I get the additional data to fill in some of the gaps in this document.
And I'll second that.
Okay, great. So we'll vote. Dick,
Yes.
Cliff,
Yes,
Jeff,
Yes.
and Mariah. Did we lose Mariah? Okay,
Sorry, I couldn't come off mute. I abstain.
Okay, and I vote yes. All right, so we'll circulate this on Wednesday, for discussion. Okay. Let's see, so the next item is enrollment forecast. I'm gonna go off screen share, if that's okay, people. All right, Cliff, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
I just saw a typo in it. So this 1.25 page document is really just a summary of conversations we had much earlier, that talks about enrollment forecasting. It gives a little bit of history. It discusses the approach that the public schools have used in the last 2 years. And it essentially says that that approach is proving to be fairly accurate in, for a very immediate period, like 1 year. But that we have questions as to whether or not it is an appropriate methodology or is useful for a longer term forecast for planning purposes. And I think as we discussed and I believe voted on earlier last year, back in August or September, actually, was a recommendation that the school committee go back and retain Cropper-McGibbon, as I believe they have for the upcoming year. Mariah can correct me, on a periodic basis, every 2 to 3 years, just to get updated forecast for longer term purposes and for their own planning. And that's really the gist of the 1.25 pages, if you haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Yes, we've talked about doing periodic refreshes of the demographic study.
And has the school committee retained Cropper-McGibbon?
For a future one?
Yeah,
No, no.
I thought okay, all right. So this is a recommendation for that.
Or at least not that I know of. I could be wrong, but I don't think
Well,
so.
If you don't know it, then I assume it hasn't been done.
Does this name them? Or it says them
does.
or somebody else? As I
It does name them or someone else.
Yeah, which is fine. Yeah. I did not want to be picking one firm in our recommendation, but my recollection is it did not. Okay.
Okay.
Are we good?
Any feedback or comments on this? Do people have a chance to review it?
So the language is recommendations that the PSB commit via school committee policy to have such an update or entirely new report if a vendor other than Cropper-McGibbon is selected every 3 years. In other words, if Cropper-McGibbon can you like them and you can just get an update for that from them, great. If you decide you don't like them, then you need to start with an entirely new report from a new vendor.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Are you
I would
moving?
like.
Can I ask a question? Cliff, what do you mean by backwards looking methodologies?
So the methodology that the schools are currently using is a backwards looking methodology. Okay, so it is looking at, for kindergarten, it's looking at taking an average of the prior 3-year entering classes. It's taking the arithmetic average and using that as the estimate for the next year. And for each grade in 1 through 12, they're looking at the prior 3-year survival rates, taking an average of those and applying the survival rate for,
Right.
1st to 2nd grade. So
Yes.
that to me is backwards looking.
Okay, I just think that the term backwards looking implies that, like, I don't know, it's possibly misunderstandable.
Okay, if you get better language, please.
I don't know yet. maybe it just needs
Alright.
to be defined what you actually mean, like the methodology they do. I don't know if you did that. I might have missed
The
it.
methodology is spelled out actually in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. The other thing I have is you wrote like the methodology that they used, you said from the late 1990s and early to mid 2000s, but I think they were using cohort survival and even worse methodologies because they were using birth for all the way through almost up to 2020. I want to say that was going in through like 2018. So I don't know that it stopped in the mid 2000s. I think
Okay,
yeah.
I'm happy to use a particular date or year or I just picked a year, picked
Yeah.
a time period because I did not know a year, so I picked a general time period. So up to COVID.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, basically it was up to like Baldwin when the whole conversation of how many students we're gonna have was really salient, right? And B space and all of that. And that's when that was
B-Space was before COVID.
2012, I think.
Well, so Cropper McGibbon was retained in 2019.
No, I
right?
know,
So it
but
was,
but then in the middle was and then when we were at Baldwin was when they were still using kindergarten cohort survival based on birth rates and then adding back the Metco counts also. So it was a double, anyways, I think that it was, I'll think maybe about a little bit of words of how I didn't see this before tonight, so I missed it altogether, but I might share a little bit of words to add to it if that's okay. Unless you're gonna
Yeah,
vote it tonight.
that's fine. It'll just be, that's fine.
Perhaps.
I mean, I'm
sorry.
in no rush to get this by Wednesday, if that's the concern.
Can you share the Word doc with me and I could maybe make some
Yeah,
track changes, edits for you to consider?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, perhaps look back approach would be a little.
Yeah, I was thinking like look back or retrospective or something like
Yeah.
that, rather than backwards looking implies something, it has
Right.
multiple meanings that I don't think
Right.
is what
If
you
you
meant.
forget the word looking, then it's the backwards approach.
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't read it that way, but I could see what your consideration. So.
And in fact, it was somewhat backwards, which is why we don't do it anymore. Nonetheless,
Fair enough.
right? Like
Yeah.
we're more, I think it was, we're looking at this with more sophistication than we did previously.
Yeah.
I wasn't, I was, okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Whatever. Take a look. I've sent you the Word document, read it, and then let me know what you think.
Okay, so we can pick this up again next week. Okay, all right, good. Thank you, Cliff. So we have two other things that we jumped around a little bit. So the one thing is a discussion about the overrides, the number, and I spoke with Chaz. It is on the agenda for Wednesday for Bella to share the proposed numbers. So we should get some additional information in that meeting, which is good. Obviously, I was hoping we would have it last week, which is why I put it on the agenda for the prior meeting as well. So I think we can pick up this discussion next week, and I think we have a little bit more clarity just on the timeline, which was open from my point of view.
I have a question though. Is the conversation about the override and its size and its structure one that we should have in this subcommittee, or is it just a conversation that's best had with the full committee?
It's a good question. I think you guys might have spoken about this when I was out. I think I can go either way. I think there is some benefit to us talking about it here, but ultimately needs to be discussed within the full committee. So I'm happy to punt it to just the full committee.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly was my thinking with issues that I'm looking at.
Okay. That's fine. What I was hoping to talk about here was just when are we going to get the numbers and get some clarity.
Yeah.
And I
actually had assumed that we had the numbers from the schools in the presentation that was, but I gather those have now been refined. There was a slide that showed the funding gap, I think was the term used, over each of 3 years.
Yep. So my understanding had been that, yes, that was the funding gap, and then there was a question about, some discussion about whether that was going to be also be the override number. So I think we'll find out, on Wednesday. But that was my understanding, and I don't have additional information.
All right.
Okay. All right, and then the final thing I wanted to talk about is just the timeline for between now and the time that we have to get the document out. So I'm just gonna share my screen. I posted this document as well, but I'm just gonna focus on this. So this was today's meeting. So for tomorrow, Dick, we're gonna talk about your document again from last week. I don't think we'll talk about building usage, but I am gonna share the town school financial model, includes building usage. I will share a draft of the CLA report. And I don't think we'll be reviewing draft sections tomorrow, but it is on the agenda. I found out this afternoon to discuss the numbers, as I had mentioned. For next week, what we will then do is I am going to, over the next few days, start pulling together the overall report. There are some sections that need to be filled in. I will take a crack at most of those, and then pull together the work that this committee has done. And then once documents are finalized and approved, we'll add those in, but we can start looking at the full document as it's coming together next week. Jeff, I have you on the list for BEEP next week, and then I will share the CLA update. Hopefully I'll be able to fill in the gaps, and then vote on both of those. And then those should go to the full committee, and we can share a draft of our school report. The draft town subcommittee report should also be ready to be shared then.
Okay. I do have a mechanical question. When I use one typeface and line and a half, and I know you'd use a different typeface, would it make your life easier to for all of us to agree on some sort of formatting, or
Yeah, that is a great question. I can send everybody the template that I have been using, which is the one that the town subcommittee basically wrote their whole report in. So I can actually share that template with the group, and if you have time to reformat, great. Otherwise, I was going to do that work,
okay.
for better or worse.
I mean, we can certainly get the substance of documents to the various committees and then reformat if we don't have time. But it seemed to me that it might be easier for us to do it than for you to do it. And
Yeah.
and
No,
as long as your format is consistent with the town side format, I don't know about the future side format.
They're also going to use the same template, so we've agreed.
All right.
Well, use
All
the
right.
template.
Good.
Mariah,
Okay.
one of the things that I wanted to call out in the report, so thank you, Dick, for offering that. That was generous of you. I'm not sure everyone else is excited about that based on the look on Cliff's face, but I appreciate Dick you offering. So this one section, Mariah wanted to just highlight that this was originally we'd agreed that this would be written by PSB, finance and admin. So, the goal is to pull this together over the next several days this week.
Mm,
So I
that
wanted to,
should be, that's almost directly in the executive summary of the budget.
yeah, but there, I mean,
But the no override scenario is coming out on Thursday.
okay. Well, if somebody could pull that together
Yeah.
and just write a page or two, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And then there was a follow-up actually that I believe you were going to do from last week. Let me just grab my notes. That was actually in the notes around the temperature recommendation. It was in the minutes from a couple weeks ago.
We need I need to close the loop with them. Like that was what I was saying to you yesterday. I'd lost the thread in my email with all the other emails coming in, and I need to pick it back up on where it landed.
Okay.
Because anyways, I need to pick it back up. I think you were on some of the emails, but I don't know if you were on all of the emails, Sadaf, that was the back and forth on that. And you were away
Yeah,
also.
I was on,
so-
I was definitely on some of the emails.
Yeah.
What showed up in the minutes, and I just wanted to close the loop, is, are you writing a paragraph or
Oh, I see.
recommendation? That is what
Yes.
was in the minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Let me work on that this week and see if I can get some conclusion on what this group might be interested in backing and what the staff is saying on savings, et cetera.
Okay, so then I'm
Yeah.
gonna put that on the agenda for you to share next
Next week.
week at our
Okay.
meeting. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, great.
Thank
right.
you.
That
Okay.
was it.
Could, if we're adjourning the meeting, I do have a question. If you want to just stop the recording, and then I could just ask my question if
Yep.
we're adjourning.
Yes, we're adjourning, meeting adjourned. Thank you.